Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about what's driving the cloud computing market. And we're also looking at an increasingly important aspect of the cloud market, which is how does cloud computing enable artificial intelligence? Very hot topic these days. To discuss that, I'm joined by David Linthicum, Chief Cloud Strategy Officer at Deloitte Consulting. Dave, very good to have you with us today.
It's great to be here again, James. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Absolutely. So what is driving the cloud market here in 2023? It seems like there's a lot going on. I hear basically that there's definitely a major desire for cost control,
Right.
and also a way to find to control the monster called multi-cloud. I mean, the companies started all these clouds somewhat pell-mell, and now they realize that we've got to manage all this. But at the same time, with all that's going on, I sense that companies realize, hey, cloud enables AI, making it even more important. Your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody thought there was going to be a downturn in cloud spending, and suddenly we see studies where it looks like people are back into the game, not because they're necessarily looking to spend more money, but they view generative AI and using that as a force multiplier for their business is something that's non-voluntary. They have to do it. And so boards of directors are coming to IT and saying, how are we going to automate our supply chain, increase our customer experience, do all these things that they haven't done well in the past through the use of generative AI. And of course, that runs in the cloud. So there's an interest in cloud computing because there's an interest in generative AI. There is still an interest in cost controls. They don't want to overspend for it. And FinOps is becoming more of a hotter topic within enterprises that are leveraging this technology. But it's definitely queuing up to be a larger spending spree, I think, in 2024, 2025 around cloud computing because they're interested in getting to AI through cloud computing.
Well, first of all, thank you for using the phrase generative AI, because that has to be used in every conversation at this point. You get 5,000
AI washing,
bonus
it's
points.
all about it.
I guess it's a funny thing about cloud is there any other topic except for AI, really generative AI? For all the years I've been covering cloud has been like really dominant. And suddenly, as of last November, when ChatGPT came out, it's like everyone's talking about AI. It's really the only thing. It almost sounds like the idea of controlling multi-cloud, which used to be a really hot topic, is a little bit quaint these days. Are companies still concerned about, hey, we need to control this thing called multi-cloud?
Yeah, from an operational layer, you got to remember AI is about solving strategic problems. In other words, building core systems to take our business to the next layer. If you look at multi-cloud, it's really about operating infrastructure in more efficient ways. And so that's always been a hot topic, but it's a solvable problem. We can move at it with, different money and siloed based solutions, and looking at cloud computing as kind of separate cloud brand names, so you can run it inefficiently and still run it. So people are looking to become more efficient at multi-cloud, typically through the operational layer. So in other words, they're trying to do that better. So that's not as interesting to talk about or even write about as kind of the generative AI stuff when you get into the capabilities of technology, which is approaching science fiction. But you got to have both. And I think people are still spending money and talking about multi-cloud. It's certainly still a topic that I talk about a lot, as well as the generative AI stuff. But it's just becoming supplanted because there's only so much writing and speaking we can do in the tech community, and people seem to be focused on that. But I get most of the things that I do on a daily basis is explaining how multi-cloud can be operated in a much more efficient way. But in many instances, they're doing so because now they're moving into a multi-cloud environment because they realized they needed more than one cloud brand to leverage generative AI to kind of take things to the next level.
Well, all right, speaking of that move to AI, what is your sense of the enterprise approach to AI in terms of spending? I would think there'd be a massive land rush to invest, or desire to plan and research, but I also hear like, oh, there's a tentative thing. We want to think about this a little bit more. We know it's hot. We have to get on board the train, and yet we're not quite sure. I mean, certainly there's a surge in interest that's once in a generation. Do you feel like that wallets are open correspondingly?
They are. I think the studies I'm seeing is that the spending is going to be a lot more generous in terms of leveraging AI technology because they do see the immediate feedback and advantage. The problem with that is, in many instances, I don't think businesses have a good understanding of the problems they're looking to solve. So it's one thing to say, well, we need Gen AI, just like we needed cloud 12 years ago. What issues are we looking to solve? What are we trying to improve within the business processing? And that really kind of needs to be the gap that people need to narrow. So in doing that, my concern is that everybody's ready to spend a lot of money, but not necessarily are going to end up solving a lot of the problems they need to solve because they're misapplying generative AI in certain domains where it doesn't belong. So for example, there's no need to use it to build transactional sales systems. You may want to mine your sales data to figure out new patterns of understanding and how you approach your customers from a marketing perspective, or the ability to leverage Gen AI as far as recommendation engines and dealing with, digital transformation and how you interact with clients. That's going to have some benefits. But in many instances, I'm hearing about businesses that are going to be pushing this in certain directions where it really doesn't belong. So spending's open, the wallets are open. Everybody's looking to it's going to be net new spending as well. They're not moving or diverting their IT budgets, and everybody's for that, including the boards of directors. The core thing is, are we going to be making mistakes very similar to the way in which you use this technology in the past? And by the way, we've seen AI waves in the past. My first job out of college was an AI analyst because AI was a big deal at the time,
Really?
doing list-based development and things like that, which is very expensive. So here we are again with much better technology and cheaper technology, commodity technology, but we could end up making the same mistakes. I noticed that a lot of people around who made the initial mistakes are, retired and out of the business. And my core concern is that we're going to move after this in a less than strategic direction and make lots of tactical mistakes that are going to be derailing the value of generative AI.
Yeah, and on that same note, I have a feeling that many of the executives and managers, they really can't fully predict what's going to happen with generative AI or even its role in their business. And so they know they need to move ahead, but are they able to really predict it? Because it really is not like previous technologies. There's client server, there's data center. I mean, it sort of moved to a certain orderly movement. Even cloud, it was a step forward, but it wasn't. It seems like this is really a hockey stick moment. I'm not sure companies really know what they're getting themselves into.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It is going to be a hockey stick moment in terms of interest in which is going to lead to spending. But is it going to be a hockey stick moment in terms of spending aligned directly with the value that's coming back to the business? And that remains to be determined. I've seen some very good uses of generative AI that are really going to take business to the next level. And we'll see businesses in the next few years that'll be built upon this technology. In other words, they'll be around their technology. They're going to do something better than their competitors, whether it's pharmacy or pharmaceuticals or transportation or whatever. They're going to provide a better experience and therefore weaponize the technology to take their business to a level where they're able to disrupt their market and capture a larger share of the market. And we saw a lot of this in the past years with, the ride sharing business and things like that. So that's going to be applied in different industries where they're just going to be able to take over. But I think a lot of businesses are going to misspend the technology and not necessarily look at the efficiencies of it and not put it to good use. And we're also going to see leveraging of data in better ways. We have the potential of doing that. And so in many instances, they're going to put Gen AI in place, but not necessarily get their data assets in a mature place. And so Gen AI is not going to be useful to you unless you're able to leverage a certain amount of data in a certain amount of ways. It's garbage in, garbage out. So the other concern would be they're not investing in modernizing their databases to really apply to Gen AI to allow Gen AI to do what it does, interpret data in certain more intelligent ways to drive business processes better, to drive better customer experience, better product development, better innovation, which is really going to increase the value in the businesses.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about this somewhat about how AI is supported heavily by the cloud, and then no doubt enables data storage and analytics. How can decision makers use this knowledge to optimize their AI deployment? In other words, they're really aware, like, hey, cloud is where it's at in terms of growing our AI deployment. How does that help them? How does that help them navigate?
Yeah, there's great tools in cloud, but probably better than on-premise now. We have better security, we have better governance, we have better management technology, better networking systems, believe it or not. And so it's leveraging that technology in a certain way so we can monitor what those things are doing, how much spending is occurring, and also dynamically how much value is coming back. That's very difficult to do on-premise. So the nice thing about cloud, if we have our Gen AI systems in the cloud, our data in the cloud, and we have our core business processes in the cloud, I can monitor every aspect of that because it's on the same platform. It's homogenous. It's on, a particular cloud brand and make those things happen. So leverage the tools of that cloud brand to find out what's going on, what's happening, and ultimately what value is coming back to the business, the ability to kind of set up these core metrics. So you can't do that in a widely distributed, heterogeneous world just because the tools are very difficult to integrate. It's much more easier to do in the cloud. The difficulty there is I'm not trying to limit everybody to a single cloud provider. So moving forward, they need to consider many different solutions on many different providers. And by doing that, they may end up in a heterogeneous environment. We have the same problem we just talked about in multi-cloud. In other words, the complexity of the heterogeneity is causing a latency and leveraging the stuff. So we have to find kind of a good trade-off between leveraging this technology on the platform where it's most optimized and it's going to be most efficient, and do so in such a way we're able to determine and monitor the metrics and the value that comes back. And I think that's thinking that needs to be occurring today. We're probably not doing enough of that yet. And I think that we need to kind of reflect the fact, and it really kind of converges the problem. If you think about this as a multi-cloud problem, it's an operations problem, but it's applicable in terms of our movement into Gen AI systems.
You know, it's funny, you know, to hear you use the phrase heterogeneous, and I've had this theory for years that I think at some point we might start to collapse under the weight of our own complexity. So you're talking about a multi-cloud world, it's a distributed world, and yet there's a new technology that's more complicated than ever before. It looks like a bit of a train wreck on the way. Like, are people really going to be able to know how to handle this?
Well, we're seeing complexity as a key inhibitor to people leveraging multi-cloud, operationalize it. And in many instances, they're spending two and a half times that they spent on the same systems running on premise. And so they do get the advantage of leveraging AI and more faster moving technology, agility, the ability to have efficient access to that technology, things like that. But it's really a wall that needs to get around right now. In fact, the industry right now, the AI ops business is calling it a complexity wall. So how we get around that operational limitation and get by the added expense that multi-cloud is going to bring is going to be the big thing right now. And of course, we're talking about super cloud and meta cloud. Lots of people are inventing, you know, different kind of conceptual ways to deal with the problem. The reality is we don't have one fair stack and one set of best practices that are applicable in every domain. So if you're going to, in essence, remove a lot of the complexity, that means removing a lot of the redundancy by finding cross-cloud services to deal with security, operations, even AI and data, using a single logical layer that you only have to deal with as a human being. Therefore, it reduces the complexity. But getting to that single logical layer and that single layer of automation is something that people have made some tactical inroads in making that happen, but we don't have one strategic killer application or product that's able to provide these services for us. So people who are solving this cloud complexity problem, it's going to be a bespoke solution with whatever stack that makes sense for that particular problem domain. And quite frankly, we're not good at doing that. We like things that we're able to get out of a box and apply and, you know, throw tools at the problem. It's going to take a while before we figure out how to reduce the amount of complexity. And I think it's going to be a lot of battles that we need to win the war. We need to figure out security. We need to figure out governance. We need to figure out operations. We need to figure out all these things that are, in essence, moving piece parts to start eliminating the redundancy. But some businesses, to their credit, are moving in those directions. They're experimenting this technology. You know, they're engaging us and other people who are experts in, you know, dealing with cloud complexity mediation and getting the ideas and how they're going to have the path to make that better. And I think if they're able to get to that point, we're able to reduce a lot of complexity, then it opens themselves up for the ability to leverage other technologies fairly easily, including generative AI. It just snaps in and we're able to manage it using the same infrastructure, basically creating another silo of technology that we have to manage on its own terms. Instead, we're managing that technology on our terms. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm. What about the issue of large language models? I hear executives talking about, you know, we need to make sure that large language models are really optimized. Some people are using more proprietary ones. Some people have large language models. It seems like it's sort of the under the headlines issue of competitiveness in AI. How powerful is your LLM? Do you hear people talking about that?
I do, and it's really, if you think about it, it's everything. You know, ultimately becomes the value in the brain of what generative AI, any system can do. You know, remember, without the data and without the LLMs that are built using that data, it's really nothing. That's core to everything that it does. And so there's nothing magical about that. The more knowledge that's in those systems and the more ways in which we're able to get it out, the more value that generative AI or other AI systems, for that matter, is going to have. So the race is on. The ability to build these things well, who's going to have the best large language model and who's going to be able to leverage it in the most unique and innovative ways. And, we're using this stuff online. We find it very amazing. They can write a thank you note and, even write your bio or write a resume and things like that.
Right.
But when we get to the point, we're going to have certain specialized areas, industry specific areas, for example, finance modeling and retail modeling and things like that, where it's not only a big brain that provides general information, but a big brain that looks at particular specificities around particular industries and able to do things very well. Investing, for example, that's going to be huge. Your ability to invest using large language models that are able to take a lot of that stuff to the next level, leveraging current and historical data. And that's kind of where you get into where the race is right now, is who's able to build those things in a certain level of quality, a certain level of dimension that's going to be applicable for particular businesses. We've already done the general purpose stuff like ChatGPT, things like that. What about finance? What about travel? What about retail? And what about specialized industry specific solutions for making that happen?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think the big question is the future of cloud and AI as a combined entity. And we've talked about this a bit in the past, but I think there's a strong possibility they would combine so that AI eventually becomes almost an invisible, omnipresent part of every cloud-based tool instead of a standalone tool to purchase. Agree, disagree? How do you see that evolving?
No, I completely agree. I noticed it sneaking into developments with the AI code-based generators, which are incredibly useful tools for people who are developing and building models. It's sneaking into DevOps. It's certainly sneaking into operations. We've had AI ops around for years, the ability to apply AI in security and do security better. We always joke about AI washing, that it's kind of part of every conversation now because you want to, be the cool kids on the block with the AI capabilities. But the reality is it's useful and applicable in lots of different domains now because the cloud has made it ubiquitous and also made it cheap. So, and the core thing with AI was always the fact that it's too expensive to deploy. Even back when I was building, AI systems when I was much younger, they were going to be $50 million as the buy-in price just to get the base functionality. That's not the case right now. It's practically free. Even the cloud providers are charging for it, but the amount of value that you get back from it is certainly discernible and certainly something that everybody understands. Even if you're not a technician, you see the fact that this stuff is cool. It's able to do stuff that normally I wouldn't be able to have a technology do. And it's applicable in any number of domains, and we're seeing that right now.
Interesting. So, I mean, before we wrap up, I'd like to get your personal sense. It's funny, since ChatGPT came out last November, I see more of a sense of doom around AI than, there's certainly an excitement about it, but there's a vague unease that before then, it seemed like there was only optimism about AI. But now there's a feeling like, well, there's doom, there's job loss, there's shape shifting. We don't know where it's going. Do you hear that feeling of anxiety or fear, or not necessarily?
Well, I heard it all my career. The reality is every time we have a merge of technology, we had code generators and we had AI's been around. AI's been around since the 50s. And conceptually, it's had kind of the same understanding of the value that's going to be able to bring. And the reality is we deal with technological changes all the time. It's a constant with business and what we do. And certainly we had automation of, farming systems and all these things that kind of come into play. And we adapt around it. And normally it has a positive impact on society. It's able to, in essence, automate things that we may not want to do as human beings. And we can be left to what we do. We're creative, innovative beings that are providing and creating this technology. So we're going to see that the business is going to adapt around the utilization of this technology. There's going to be more opportunities in the environment, certainly for technicians. And the ability to kind of of this stuff to add value to our human living is where the value is going to bring. And so I see mostly upsides. There's always going to be some downsides. Certainly industries are going to be disrupted and jobs are going to be disrupted with this technology. But I think most of it's going to create new opportunities for those same people where they're going to be able to have a better life, make more money, just kind of enjoy life better. So I think it's a net positive in where we're looking to go with the technology.
I like your optimism on that. And on that note, thanks so much for talking with us today, David. I enjoyed it, learned a ton as always, and please come back and talk with us again sometime.
Anytime, James. Thank you.